Hello, everybody. My name is Gaurav, and welcome to another episode of Super Negotiator. I want to ask you a question. How are you negotiating in 2022? Are you still taking three quotations from your supplier? Are you still using the minimum quotations as your benchmark and asking for best and final offer to negotiate? Is that all that you're doing today? Or have you evolved your skill set? You are using data to not only understand what's the appetite of your suppliers to negotiate, but you're also using it to craft your negotiation tactics. Well, I want to be on the right side. And today, I will start sharing my things, my techniques that I use to craft my negotiation strategy right from scratch. So let's jump right into it. As I said, the title of this series is going to be How to Negotiate Like a Pro. In my view, there are about four components that everybody, every category manager, no matter whether you're starting on day one or you have 15, 20 years of experience, they should have these four aspects covered before you write that email to your supplier. The first one is do your homework. What do I mean by do your homework? Do you know, most importantly to start with, what are the cost drivers of your category? Not only from the raw material side or the cost of manufacturing, but also to the distribution side of the stuff. We will go into the details later for this, and I will show you one example also. But it's very important for you to know for sure on a very high level what are the cost components which drives the prices in your category. The second aspect in the do your homework series would be, do you really understand the macroeconomics, the big forces that are driving the changes in your category? And again, as I said, it's basically we will cover in depth in the next one or two slides how well you know your category. That's number one. The second lever in this aspect is, can you define the appetite of your suppliers to sell? What do I mean by this? You cannot be in a powerful position from a buyer perspective at all the times, especially during the supply chain crisis. You wanted the supplies more than the supplier needs to sell. They were having many options. Now, how well you can judge who wants to sell, who wants to negotiate, what sort of margin can you negotiate, what sort of margins are available, who's in the driver's seat when it comes to the negotiation. Now, this exactly what do I mean by, can you define appetite of your suppliers to sell? Your first reaction would be, of course, I know I've been dealing with that supplier for 15 odd years. I know from my gut feel perspective, but I'm sorry. We are talking about using data here, data that is objective to show not only how much margin a supplier is keeping, whether you can reduce the margin, whether you can increase the quantities or not, etc., etc., etc. But can you objectively define the appetite? Not everyone in your organization will have as much as experience you're having. Okay, so we are using the data to objectively define the appetite. The third aspect here is know your wallet. What do I mean by know your wallet? It's very important. Many buyers just focus on the transactions. They just focus on the quantity at hand. They just focus on the unit prices or the total value that is under negotiation for that particular sourcing event only. All right. And what I'm asking here is, have an overall view. Are there any other requirements planned later for the year? How can you know for sure this is the only time you're going to negotiate in the year? Are there any bundling opportunities available? Can you increase your wallet size? Because in negotiation, the leverage is derived from the commitments, is derived from the volume. So, do you really know your wallet? And again, we will go in depth for this concept as well. The fourth aspect is the tactics and strategies. You cannot use the same tactic and same strategy for your negotiation with all the suppliers. Every supplier has a different power center. Every supplier operates differently. They have different margins. They have different negotiation appetites. So you need to understand how you will going to negotiate. How are you going to negotiate with each of those suppliers? Example, are you going to invite them in reverse auction or face-to-face negotiation? Are you, my procurement manager, going to negotiate directly with the sales director of your supplier right from the first email? Or are you going to introduce your executives with the sales director later? Are you going to ask for the no regret offer right from the upfront? Are you going to bluff? Can you walk away from any of the suppliers? And that's what do I mean by analyzing what sort of tactics you want to have with each of your supplier. We will go in depth later. Last but not the least, analysis of the bids. After doing the first four steps, once you receive the bids from your supplier, how can you know for sure how much is the leverage available for negotiation? Do you already have the best price? Whom you can negotiate with and by how much? And that's exactly what we will see in the analysis of bid section. So these are the 5 basic steps I would like to have absolute clarity on before I write that first email to my supplier and invite him for the negotiation. Now, I will now go to the first aspect which we discussed, what we is called do your homework. Let's go there. Do your homework. And as I said, it doesn't really matter whether you are on your day 1 or whether you are in year 15 handling the same category. You need to have this base covered. The first aspect is the should cost model. Can you really describe the major cost components, not only in the manufacturing, but also in the distribution side of the stuff? And I will share an example today, which is for Nike shoe. Give me a moment. There you go. So the diagram that you're seeing right now is, and thanks to soulreview.com, is a cost component breakdown, or let's say the cost overview, the different aspects of the cost involved right from the manufacturing of a sneaker till the final retailer distribution. That is the end to end. As per this diagram, if you see, it's about $100 is a retail price for a Nike shoe. $22 goes for the cost of production. All right, $50 is like 50% is the retailer margin, and just about $5 is the net profit or income. The rest $5 are in marketing, the rest $5 are in the freight, insurance, and custom duty. Now, my purpose of showing you this example is to give you an idea how you can solve or prepare your category cost structure using similar analysis. There are primarily 2 or 3 sources by which you can do that. Number 1, you might buy a publication. I think there are some paid services available that gives you should cost models on demand. Second, and which is my number 1 way to go for, is I read white papers, PhD theses, and during those theses you can see At a very high level, what are the cost components available? That's the starting point for me. And third, which has been a recent learning for me, is you can analyze the income statements of your supplier. You can take help of your finance colleagues to do it, and that's a really fascinating area of a collaboration. The diagram in front of you, prepared by Soul Review, is purely based on the income statement of Nike. And I was really fascinated, and it opened an eye for me. Is it not only gives me a very high level idea of, okay, what's the cost of production, which is like 22%, but when a sales manager or a sales director pitching the solution or giving me the quotation, I can estimate how much gross margin, net margin, etc., their corporate operates on, and then what's the minimum they can go, what's the maximum they can go, etc. Gives me a really, really good lever to start with. So my request to you is just not focus on the cost to produce, but analyze the income statements of your key strategic suppliers and prepare this for your categories before you go into the negotiation. And we will use this example in the stage 2 while measuring the appetite of your suppliers to sell. Okay, that's the step 1. The step 2 in your homework series is the basic analytics. And I would not spend much time here. Basic analytics meaning spend last year, spend this year, who were the suppliers, who were the suppliers discontinued, what were their position, etc., etc., etc. This your spend analysis tool should give you a really standard input. The third aspect here is the macroeconomics. And again, this is really standard in terms of what are the major cost drivers, which is their should cost model. Apart from that, their currency impact, the logistics, the freight. Most important factor for me in macroeconomics is the demand and supply. Okay? At a given point of time, which side you are standing on? Is the buyer in a stronger position, meaning there is more demand, there's less demand, more supply, or the vice versa? It's really understand. Take an example of semiconductor shortages. You can do all the analysis, should cost model, basic analytics, but the demand and supply situation will not allow you to be in a really hardball negotiation situation. You are in a mode of security of the supply, and that's why when I say do your homework, you need to understand where do you stand. The number is one part of the story. Macroeconomic is another part of the story. You need to understand your category. Are you on the fence, meaning you can play hardball, or are you on defense, meaning you need security of supply? That's what you need to know when you say do your homework, right? Let's go to the step number 2, which is, can you define the appetite of your suppliers to sell? Come here. Number 2, how do you define the appetite to sell? How do you do that? Now, as I said, for me, there are about 6-7 factors, and I am very, very methodological when it comes to quantifying the appetite. So let me give you a framework here, and then we will build on that example. Let's say this is supplier 1, this is supplier 2, and let's say this is supplier 3. Okay? And 6 or 7 factors I want to state here is, the first one for me is always sales. And I will explain all the factors after I write it down. The second would be the gross margin. The third would be the net margin. The fourth is net profit. The fifth is market share. The sixth is their order pipeline, and I will explain this. And the seventh is my wallet or my requirement. Now, people might add a eighth one, but for me, eighth is just an output or an activation function. It's up to you. It's the timing. Okay, but let's say we add it to the whole factor. So eight factors in total. Now let me go one by one and try to explain you why this is an absolutely beautiful exercise before you go into the negotiation. The first one, usually I have an indicator in terms of a binary, whether the sales are up or down. For example, positive or negative, right? Up or down. So I will classify, for example, the sales is up, sales is down for these guys. The second one is gross margin. For example, it could be 40% for this guy, 30%, and then let's say 50% here. Similarly, net margin, let's say is 10% here, 7% here, 5% here. Net profit could be 5%, 3%, 2%, whatever. Okay, park it. Now, I will explain you why we are calculating this, but with help of your finance team, or you can even find Financial Times ready-made analysis for most of your suppliers if they're disclosing the income statements. Try to compile this view. All right, this gives you a very good idea in terms of what's the margin available whenever you're getting the selling price. Now, remember, and I'll bring up that example again. When your supplier pitches you a quotation here, you can definitely know now the gross margin for that supplier would be 100 minus 50. So they're operating at $50 gross margin percentages. Okay, what's the net margin for a very high level? 50 minus 22, whatever the sum there is. So maybe the net margin is roughly 22 plus 10, 32, 15, 47. So roughly their net margin is about 3 or 5. I'm just making the numbers up. Okay. So now you can roughly understand at a corporate level what's the gross margin percentages, what's the net margin percentages. That's one. Secondly, you compare this previous 3 years, last 3 years. So you can see a trend whether the margin is going up, margin is going down. Similarly, when you do this with the competitors, whether the margin is going up, whether the margin is going down. And why this analysis is absolutely important, because if their gross margin or net margin is decreasing, then there will be a pressure for these guys to make sales which has a higher margin, right? When the sales is up, if the sales is down, then the pressure is to sell more numbers, etc., etc. So this is a balancing act. And when you put the numbers together, you can analyze in which direction the supplier will be willing to go. Okay, whether it's a number growth they are looking at, or whether they are looking for a margin growth. It should be either one of the priority. In ideal world, both. The other aspect is, if the margins are getting lower than their competitors, then of course then you can also understand the forces who will be more competitive, who will be more cooperative, etc. So I do this analysis just to get that sort of a feeling from numbers perspective. The other aspect is the market share. Now again, I want to compare, or I do compare between these three suppliers, who's gaining the market share and who's losing the market share. All right, so it's whether it's up, whether it's down, neutral, blah blah blah, etc., etc. Okay, so that's the market share vertical. Now the next is the order pipeline, which is extremely important. You need to understand who else is buying other than you in your organization. Who else is negotiating? So if you stop the POs today with this buyer, for how long you will have the relationship till the last order runs out. Prepare that order pipeline. Okay, and the way I do is I quantify in terms of numbers, and then for example this could be 10 million, this could be 5 million, this could be 2 million, etc., etc., etc. And then I compare whether this is enough for them to last for, depending upon the sales or depending upon the average customer size. So each account has an order value, right? So on annual basis, I then translate that into the period. So for example, if my average billing for the supplier is 100 million in a year and my pipeline is only 10 million, that means the pipeline is shorter. It's only one tenth, right? So the pressure on my account manager will be higher to get the pipeline back. Okay, so the shorter the pipeline, the higher is the pressure. So if it's shorter, then its pipeline is down, the pipeline is up, etc., etc. I hope you get the idea. The next is the wallet. The wallet is in terms of, like I explained, not only today's requirement, but future requirement also. What do I mean by future? Contract renewals, your strategic project which supplier doesn't know about, some of the vendor share that you want to transfer from your uncompetitive supplier to, let's say, this supplier after you have done your homework, some of the opportunities to diversify, some of the new market opportunities, etc., etc., etc. Have your wallet ready that you can commit before you go into the negotiation. So for me, the wallet would be, let's say, for this, I want to reduce, I want to increase, I want to increase, etc., etc. All right. When I say reduce, I basically mean even if I have a requirement of 10 units, I don't want to give 10 units to this guy because I want to delay or diversify. For supply to, when I say increase, I mean I am willing to go more than 10 units, 10 units being my current requirement. I want to go beyond 10 units and commit some of the future supplies or not. Similarly for supplier 3. The last is about the timing. When you combine everything, the way I do is, and then I see whether it's a month end, it's a quarter end, etc., etc. These sort of checks keeps me updated or alerted that if the overall picture, because of these 7 factors, is not promising, it's very likely the quarter end is going to be a hard negotiation for me. When I say hard negotiation, I mean I can press all the leverages and get a better deal. If the 7 scenarios are in favor of supplier, and as I said, you need to determine whether you're playing offense or whether you're playing defense. Depending upon the 7 scenarios, the timing element may or may not matter from supplier perspective. The other aspect of the timing element is, can you delay your requirement? For example, if your quantity is 10, can you delay all the 10? Can you delay just 5? Can you divide, etc., etc., etc.? So this is what I mean by timing. So generally what I do is all these 7 and 8 I compile in terms of an overall score. And when you combine them in terms of overall score, higher the score, I press higher because that's my power. And again, you can combine according to your preference, just the score at the end of the day. But higher is the score, that means I am in the command, I go on offense. Lower is the score, I mean I have to play defense. This is how I measure their appetite to sell. Uh, One of the aspects from the gross margin exercise could be, for example, supplier 1, supplier 2, supplier 3, gross margin, let's say 50%, 30%, 40%, and let's say if their unit price is in the range, let's say $100 here, $120 here, $130 here, you can figure out for yourself how much gross margin they are making, but you can also use the industry standard of 30% to demand and ask these guys to bring down this gross margin by 20% and this guy bring down their gross margin by 10% because their competitor is there. Now, I hope you are able to grasp everything, but if I have to take one slide away, it's this slide. Start working on your supplier data collection in this way. I think for the first 4, your finance team can help, and the rest, your center of excellence team should be compiling this data for you. The rest of the 3 components, know your wallet, tactics, and strategies, and analysis of bid I will cover in future session. But take a pause, take a screenshot, learn this appetite to sell measurement framework. My name is Gaurav. Thank you for watching this video. A special shout out to all the startups. If you're in Dubai, I would love to meet you, get some brainstorming exercises done. If you are outside of the Dubai, I would love to have you on my next vlog. If you're interested, hit me up in my DM and then I'll connect with you separately. Thank you so much. I'll see you in the next one.